squid tones. And he always prided himself on being a music guy.
Hello.
Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
Thank God I'm doing well. How is everybody?
Excellent.
Hello, Rabbi.
Baruch Hashem, good.
Terrific. All right. Let's get rolling. Sorry it's a minute or so late over here. So, Hilchas Shvisas Yom Tov, the laws of Yom Tov, are resting on Yom Tov. Perek Sheni, the second perek. Right? So I hope everybody's with us here. Aleph. Efrech Shenoilad B'Yom Tov. A chick which was hatched from an egg on Yom Tov. Also, it is forbidden and to eat or to carry. Muksa, because it is considered muksa. Now, at the end of the last pair, we started the conversation of noilad, something that was not ready or not worthy of being used before Yom Tov would become muksa on Yom Tov. In other words, as Yom Tov enters, if there's something that I had kind of removed from my mind and said, I'm not going to be able to use that on Yom Tov, then I'm no longer allowed to touch it, eat it, or do anything with it. The Rambam is going to continue in this chapter with a number of examples and different halachot related to this concept of what we call nolad, something was born. The classic, as the Rambam opens here, is something which is literally born, which means on the day before Yom Tov, it was not ready. And since it was not ready, I did not intend to be able to use it. Therefore, I took it out of my mind. The Rambam continues, Ve'egel shenoilad b'Yom Tov, and a calf which was born on Yom Tov. So the Rambam says, if you were intending the mother to cow to eat, then it is allowed. Because it is considered prepared and not out of your mind together with the mother. In other words, if I would slaughter the mother on Yom Tov, which you're allowed to do, I would be allowed to eat this calf. So therefore, I have not removed it from my mind. The ilu shachat imoi, as the Rambam continues, because if I would slaughter the mother, though this calf in the mother's womb would be allowed to be eaten, even though it was not born. On the other hand, if it wasn't that type of a scenario, it wasn't mukhan akaba imoy, then it would not be allowed to if it's not prepared together with the mother like an egg. Base halacha bet an animal which, in order to pasture, it goes outside the tchum. Now we learned in Hilchas Shabbat the laws of tchum, which is the area which you're not allowed to go outside of. The things which come from outside that, those boundaries are forbidden in Shabbat and on Yom Tov. So an animal which lives with me inside, but takes its walk outside to eat grass, but then it comes back every night on its own, so to say, and sleeps within the tchum in my area. They're considered prepared because I know that it will come back. If I know it will come back, I know that I could use it. On the other hand, if therefore you could take them and you could slaughter them in Yom Tov. On the other hand, but those animals which go out to pasture and sleep outside the tchum, is in Bo Yom Tov and Sheikh tonight. And now one day they decided to take a walk back on Yom Tov. I no longer allowed to use them. They are considered muksa. Because they are muksa. And the people of this city, me the farmer, did not pay attention to have it. If I did not expect to have it, it becomes muksa and I can no longer use it on Yom Tov. Gimel, number 3. Same thing if there's an animal that I had designated to the Beis Hamikdash for kachim. And then I went ahead and checked it and I said, okay, this is really a holy animal. I cannot have any use of it. A Kohen or someone in the temple can have use. But then I took a look at it and I noticed it has a blemish. If it has a blemish, it can't be used as a korban, for example. It can't be brought as an offering. Since I did not intend on Erev Yom Tov to be able to use it, since I thought it was holy and designated to the temple. Lefichach asur liros mumay kachi b'Yom Tov. Therefore, the Rambam continues, not just it's forbidden on Yom Tov, because I did not have it in mind. I'm even forbidden to look to see if it has a blemish in Yom Tov. Because maybe I will take it to the Chacham, as the rabbi of the town, and I'll say, is this blemish a blemish, and I can no longer bring it as an offering? And he will say, yes, it is, and then I'll take it home and shecht it. But really, I'm not allowed to, because I already on Erev Yom Tov, the day before, I put it out of my mind. I thought it was holy for the Karban. I can't use it. Avo, the Rambam continues, right? Erev Yom Tov. But the rabbi can take a look at the blemish Erev Yom Tov. And tomorrow, meaning on Yom Tov, he can then say what is forbidden or permitted. At that case, since I know he's already looking at Yom Tov, I haven't completely taken it out of my head. There's a possibility that I'm going to get it back, that it's not completely mukta. Dalet, b'char, a firstborn animal, which was tahar, which was pure. Shenoila b'Yom Tov, umumay imoy, and it was born on Yom Tov and had a blemish with it. Hareza muchan, so it's considered as if it has this blemish, and therefore it's not muktzah, because since it was born with the blemish, so therefore it already had it. But to begin with, you're not allowed to look to see if it has a blemish on Yom Tov. V'im avar, but if you went ahead and did look, and you saw its mum, and you saw its blemish, and you said it is permissible, then you can go ahead and eat it. So in other words, the Rambam says, since it was born with a blemish, it's already considered a blemish. It really, all the problem here is you don't know that it has a blemish. Otherwise, you would have said, I'm allowed to use it. So therefore, really, it is allowed. But l'chadchila, to begin with, don't go looking for it. But if you already did, you're allowed to use it. On the other hand, a firstborn animal that doesn't have a blemish, but it fell into a pit. You give it what it needs to sustain in the pit. You lower down food or water, etc. But you're not allowed to take it up from the pit. Why? Because it is not allowed to be eaten on Yom Tov. Why is it not allowed to be eaten on Yom Tov? Because it's a bechar, it's a firstborn. And since it's a firstborn, I take my mind off of it. So it becomes muksa. And the Rambam just said that you shouldn't look to see if there's a blemish. So this scenario, the Rambam says this animal has been muksa, so you can't really do anything for it. Obviously, you got to give it food and etc., but therefore you shouldn't move it. What if a mother and a child falls into a pit? So here the challenge is the following. Halachically, you're not allowed to slaughter a mother and a child on the same day in the same 24-hour period. Therefore, what am I allowed to do? My lesser rishon, I bring up the first one, whichever one. And I say, why am I bringing it up? Because I'm going to slaughter it. I'm allowed to slaughter it on Yom Tov, right? So it's not muksa. So therefore, I say I'm going to slaughter and I lift it out of the pit. But I don't slaughter it. And I act as if I change my mind. And then I pick up the second one with the intention of slaughtering. And you can then go ahead and slaughter whichever of the two you want, the mother or the child. You can't do both of them on the same day. So the Rambam says, but you can do this trick and say, I'm taking up the first one with the intention of eating it till it's not muksa. Then I'm going to change my mind and bring up the second one. Why are you allowed to do this? Why are you allowed to make this trick? Because of the animal's pain, that the animal's in pain, that it's down in the pit, especially two of them. So therefore the Chachamim said, we'll find a way to help you get it out. The sage said, we can find this trick. Normally, we don't want you to do a trick in Yom Tov, but here you're allowed to. And a regular animal, not a holy animal and nothing special, fell off of a roof or fell down some area. and I'm concerned that maybe it injured itself. And many injuries, especially internal ones, could cause an animal to become treif. The actual word treif means that the internal organs of the animal are to have an issue. It could be a hole in the lungs, it could be a heart, whatever. When you learn the laws of Hilchot Shreifot, which we will, God willing, get to later on, later on in the Rabbah, we're going to get into what constitutes a what makes it shreif, what makes it non-kosher, what's it okay, kind of not okay, but what doesn't consider it non-kosher. So here the animal falls off the roof, and it's going to need someone to take a special look inside the animal and see. So what they do is they slaughter the animal, and then the special trained slaughterer, the shochet ubodek, is the one who's trained to check, will come and check inside to make sure all the internal organs are good. He comes and checks. And then you check. Since it's still possible that even though it fell off the roof, maybe it's not injured to the point of becoming treif, so we're allowed to go ahead and slaughter it and then check it. If you find that it's treif, then you can't eat it. But if it's not treif, then you can go ahead and eat it. But we don't say, oh, I'm assuming it became treif. We don't have to do that. Halacha hey. Geese or roosters or doves or other kind of birds which you eat, which grew up, which were brought up in your house. In other words, they're domesticated. They're considered prepared and ready to eat, and they're not muksa. And you don't need to go ahead and have this particular intention in mind to say, I'm planning to use that. The mere fact that they're domesticated was in your house, they're already considered that you might eat them. But on the other hand, those which are in nests, or those which kind of live far away, aliyah literally means upstairs, but kind of out of your place. And birds which kind of live in these special vessels or cubicle type things that the Rambam says were found by the kind of the outskirts of the walls of the house in a certain way. Or they lived in some kind of tower or some kind of home which is created for them. They are considered muksa. Why are they considered muksa? Because they're not in my mind to say it's easy to get that I'm going to go get to eat. If it's not in my mind that I'm going to eat, then it's muksa. But therefore the Rambam says, and therefore, if I do want to go take from those places, I have to Friday, Erev Yom Tov, the day before, I have to make a statement and say, Elu ve'elu ani noitel. This one and this one and this one I'm going to go take. I don't literally have to lift them up. I just have to say it. That's enough. So in other words, if they're in your place, they're right there. So we assume that they're automatically in your mind that maybe you'll eat them. But if they're further out in different kind of venues that are not right within your home, then we go ahead and say that you need to go ahead and say verbally each one. Vav. If you went ahead and I said, I want to take black ones and white ones. But in the era of Yom Tov, there's one kind of nest of black and one kind of nest of white birds. And I said I'm going to take from both, but now when I come in Yom Tov, they're swapped. Then the one that had the black has the white, the one that has the white has the black. Asurim, that's forbidden. Why? Sheni Omer, because I'm going to say Shema Yisrael should zivan parchulahan ve'elo acherin. Then maybe since when I was there the day before Yom Tov, the white ones were in this nest, and today they're black ones, so I don't automatically assume that the black ones I already had intention in the nest right nearby came to here, but maybe the white ones flew away. It's a random black ones came and landed in the nest. So therefore, these random black ones were not part of my mindset, so therefore they're muksa. V'chol sofik muchan, as the Rambam continues, anything which is a doubt whether a muchan I set it aside properly and had intention to use in order to make it not muksa, asar, it's forbidden. Therefore, the Rambam continues, zimin shnaim u'matzah shleisha. If I set aside and I said two, and I come back on Yom Tov and I find 3 in the nest. Hakalah says it's forbidden. Shloisha mata shnayim mutar. On the other hand, if I set it on 3 and I found 2, it's mutter. Then it is allowed because I assume 1 left, but the other 2, I'm going to make the assumption that since they were the ones I said before, they're probably the same ones. Zimain, if I set aside ones which were inside the nest and I found them now on Yom Tov right in front of the nest, if there's no other nest in the area, in other words, the area, what the Rambam is going to tell you is Chabishim Amma, 50 Amma. In other words, these birds will not travel more than 50 Amma from their nest. So therefore, if there's no other nest within 50 Amma, and even if there's one in a catty corner, if you wish, of 50, which is within 50 Amma, nonetheless, it's fine. So in other words, if I have 2 nests within 50, I could imply that one went back and forth between them. But if I don't have another nest, so I'm assuming that the ones that walked out of the nest are the same ones that were in the nest when I set it aside. But the Rambam says, what if one's on this side of the house and the other one's on the other side of the house? You have to make like an L to get there. Then the Rambam says, don't ever do that. They won't turn the corner. They'll only walk straight back and forth. So therefore, you can't assume that one went to the other, even if they're technically within the distance they would travel. Because the Rambam says they only walk in a straight line, these birds. When they're walking, they only go straight. Halacha Zayin. The Rambam is basically going through, as I said from the beginning, halacha of how you would have a situation where there's a question if the ones that I set aside in my mind to use, or I said I'm going to use in Yom Tov, are the same ones in Yom Tov. If they're not, they're muksa, and then they're aser, they're forbidden to use. If they are the same ones, then I can use them. So all these scenarios, I'm talking about situations where are they considered the same or not? And we continue with that mindset. Zayin, number 7. Dagim shebebirin gedailim. Fish which are in a large pool of water. Or animals or birds which are in a large open space, in a large space. Anything which still needs to be captured, unless I will walk into this large chicken coop, and there's 2 chickens running around. So I turn to my friend and say, grab a net, let's go get them. That means they're not caught. They're not set aside. They eat fish if it's in a large sea. Muksa, they're considered muksa. You're not allowed to capture them be Yom Tov on Yom Tov. And if you went ahead and captured them, caught them, you're not allowed to eat them. On the other hand, something which doesn't need a net and a person to go capture, but it's a small chicken coop, and there's 1 chicken walking around. I walk in and put my hands, I get him. That's considered mukhan. It's set aside, and it's considered okay. So I can therefore capture that 1 chicken on Yom Tov and eat it. The pirates are samuch le'ir, and an animal which made its quarters, so to say, made its living in a garden which is right next to the city. Yaladeha kishen kitanim shein strichen seda ein strichen zimun. So the animal, let's say the chicken, moved outside the city and kind of set up his own home. So the chickens, the little chicks of that, don't need to be captured because they're still close right by, and you can just grab them easily. Therefore, I don't need a special setting aside, because when they should die to limb, they're already in my mind. I could see them. They're right there. They're easy to take. I already intend to go get them, so therefore my intention makes it like they're set aside and they're not muksa. Halacha ches mitzudais chaya va'oifres v'dagim shepirsa me'ev Yom Tov. If I spread out nets to catch fish or animals on Erev Yom Tov before Yom Tov, lo yitom mehem b'Yom Tov, so I cannot take the animals that it captures, that get caught in the net on Yom Tov, unless I know for a fact that they got tangled in the net before Yom Tov, because if not, these ones were mechusar seder, like we said before. They needed something special to capture them, and therefore they're not in my intention. If they're not in my intention, they're muktzah, therefore they're forbidden. Hasoicher as amas hamayim erev Yom Tov. If there's a stream of water and I blocked it off at two sides, so no longer is a stream flowing this way or that way. Ulamachar hishkim matzah badakim, and the next day on Yom Tov, I wake up, I walk to the stream, and I see fish in this blocked off area. Harei l'matar, therefore they are permitted. Why? Shekvar nitztumei of Yom Tov, harei muchaden. Since I blocked off the two sides of the stream, they're already trapped. There's nowhere for them to go. So they consider that I did that. I had my attention on them. They're easy to get. Therefore, they're allowed on Yom Tov. Halacha tes, ba'yishu malei peis mechanim. A house that has completely boarded up four sides and it has food inside. V'niftach, and one of the sides came tumbling down on Yom Tov, or an earthquake or something happened and one wall tumbled down. I'm allowed to go to the open spot of the wall and take my fruit. Even though when Yom Tov comes in, I could not get this fruit because I'm not allowed to break a wall in Yom Tov. Nonetheless, in this scenario, I am allowed to once the wall comes tumbling down. A person standing in a place where they dry out figs and dates and grapes. Erev Yom Tov. B'shana hashviyas, on this during the Shemitah, the sabbatical year. Why does Rambam say sabbatical year? She'az kol ha'peres hem hefker. All the fruit are hefker; they're ownerless. So here I walk into the area where there's all these grapes and figs and dates are sitting out and drying, and really they're ownerless because it's a sabbatical year. So anybody can just pick them up and take them. Nonetheless, the Rambam says, I have to sort of make a sign, a mark that says, V'yomen, I should say, Mikan v'ad kan ani noitel. From point A to point B I will take. And if you did not say that, you're not allowed to take it. In other words, it's too open still. So you can't just say my mind is on everything. So I have to make some kind of statement and say from point A to point B. Now, anything within point A and point B, since it was ownerless, I now intended to take it and no one's stopping me from taking it. That's fine. But if I don't make those marks, then it's just too wide, too broad, too big. Yud. Now 10. And this we're going to go on to something a little bit different, but similar idea as well, which may have more of a practical conversation for us. If an brings a gift to a Jew on Yom Tov, if that gift that he brought still exists attached to the ground, he brought him a bushel of grapes, and grapes are still found on the vine. Or I brought him, or the non-Jew brings animals or fish, which is possible that the non-Jew caught them on Yom Tov. They are forbidden till the nighttime. And you have to wait until the time that it would take him to tear off the bushel or catch the animal. Even if it's a hadas, a myrtle branch, you're not even allowed to enjoy the scent of the gift until the nighttime passes and enough time after Yom Tov for the person to do it. Why do we say enough time? We had this in Hilchos Shabbat in order that there should be no reason for me to play a game and convince the guy to bring it that I could get it quicker because I'm not gaining anything. I have to wait as long as it would take if I asked him after the holiday to do it. But if there are no grapes left on the vine any longer, or if I look at the grapes, I can see they're dried out a little bit. Or I see that the animal was already captured yesterday. It looks more, whatever captured animals look like a day later. If he brought it within this tchum, the tchum is again the boundary you're allowed to go on Shabbat and on a Yom Tov and a holiday. If he brings it from outside that boundary, it's forbidden. Because now there's a new issue. Number one, the issue was, did he catch it? Did he tear it off on the holiday? which is the issue we've been talking about till now. But now there's another issue. Where did he bring it from? If he's bringing it from within the boundary, that's allowed. If he's bringing it from outside the boundary, that's no longer allowed. And if the non-Jew brings it for me, you and another Jew are allowed to have benefit from it, but I'm not allowed to. This is a practical discussion, which is discussed by many, and I don't want to run off into it, but you can discuss it at another point, or we can link you to articles. You can ask your rabbi if you get a delivery on Shabbat or in the holiday, as we're talking about here. So you ordered Prime, and it was supposed to come the day before the holiday, and then it showed up on the holiday, and in that box is a pair of shoes, and you want to wear them on the holiday. Are you allowed to or not? The shoes were not torn off the vine, but perhaps the shoes were brought from outside the boundary. So if you know the shipping and you know the tracking, and you know where it was, maybe you could get an argument. If you don't know, then it's doubtful, etc. And that part of that conversation relies on this discussion that the Rambam has right here. Incidentally, when it says if it's brought for me, another Jew could benefit, that doesn't mean my family can benefit. My family is considered like you. But in any event, let's move on. Yud. I'm just putting it out there because this one suddenly becomes a little more of a practical discussion. Some of the other ones were necessarily for many of us city dwellers who are not capturing or fishing on the holiday. Yud. Eitim shenishim min hadekel b'Yom Tov asul lahasikan minei she'noilad. Branches which are torn off of a tree on Yom Tov in order to burn, because I'm allowed to make a fire. We learned yesterday in order to cook. So here it is. I need wood to make a fire. I walk outside. I'm going to tear off a bush. The answer is no. It's no lot. Why? Because when Yom Tov began, you could not have benefit from this for fire because it was attached to a tree. And if you they were torn off into the fire, in other words, there's already some wood there, according to the way most people understand this, or some understand this at least. And then it falls into that, the branch you took off. Marba lay, and then I put more branches, as Eitzim is Muchanim Masika, and then it's okay. So in other words, if I have a pile of firewood and one branch rips off the tree and falls into the fire, I can take more from the pile, put it on top, and that one branch gets lost within the pile, and it's okay. Aramas HaTeven. Tevin is like straw, which I put aside in order to make cement, in order to either feed my animal or to make cement and build a building. Or a pile of wood that was put away in order to use for a later time. In other words, if you started collecting firewood for the winter, so it's your mindset of all of these things is it's not for now. It's going to be when I build a building. It's going to be when I feed my animal in a week. It's going to be when I make the fire in January. Then, you're not allowed to use them for fire because your mind already was removed and they become muksa. Unless you make some sign to show that you're changing your intention and you want to use them. Why? But if this tevin, this straw, was mixed with thorns, because then I know I'm not going to feed it to my animal because he's going to get hurt on the thorns. And I also know I'm not going to make cement out of it because my hands will get hurt by the thorns. So then the only thing it's worthy of being used is fire. So then I can use it for fire now because clearly I did not set it aside for a longer time. Even though I did not kind of deliberately have the mind, because there are thorns there, it shows my intention. Halacha Yubez. Kairos are pillars. They're pillars which I put aside in order to build a building. And now they're lying down in an order like a pile of wood. Because these are muksa. Why are they muksa? Because these are special pillars that I'm going to do a special project with. And I have them now lined up in a neat way. They're not going to bend. They're not going to get ruined. So it's called muksa machmas chasarin kis. We learned in Hilchos Shabbat that one of the categories of muksa is chasarin kis. Chasarin kis means that I won't use it normally because it will get ruined. An expensive object or a specialty object, I'm not going to just move around. Now, if it's a regular piece of wood, you could say, fine, whatever happens to it. But these were specially set aside for something, so they're muksa. Meloi and you also can't say, well, if somebody put aside one of these beams and along came somebody not only stepped on it and it broke in Yom Tov, again, you're not allowed to use it because that's the concept of Noilad, Erev Yom Tov, before the Yom Tov. I wasn't going to use it. It wasn't worthy for this. And now on Yom Tov becomes born into this new identity of being used for fire because it's broken. That's called Nolad. We don't do that. And dishes, whole dishes, a proper dish that are broken Yom Tov, you're not allowed to make a fire Nolad. Why? Because when Yom Tov starts, what am I going to do with this, wooden bowl? Let's say I'm going to use it as a bowl on my table. So I'm setting it aside. I'm not going to burn it. It's not firewood. It has a value. But now, for some reason, it fell on the floor and it broke. So I say, let me pick it up and throw it in the fire. The answer is no, because now you created a new identity of being able to be used for fire. But if I take the entire bowl and throw it in the fire, that's okay. Or if the bowl broke Erev Yom Tov, that's also okay. Since it was already set aside and allowed to be used for something on the holiday, it's not muksa. Once it's not muksa for one thing, it's not muksa for another thing. But if it was said, if it broke on Yom Tov, now it takes on a new identity. It's a whole different conversation. Kayoyta, by similar, the Rambam continues, goizin ushkedim, nuts, she'achlu me'erev Yom Tov, that I ate on Erev Yom Tov, masikin b'klipei and Yom Tov, and I had a bunch of nut shells sitting on the table. This is Erev Yom Tov, the day before Yom Tov. I'm allowed to throw them into the fire on Yom Tov. On the other hand, if I cracked a nut to eat on the holiday, then I can throw the shells into the fire because the shells have a different purpose and do not have that mindset of being used. Now there's something very unusual because the Rambam now comes and says, that there are other opinions in this halacha I just told you that say the exact opposite. That if you ate the fruit and nuts Erev Yom Tov before the holiday, you cannot use them for fire on Yom Tov. Before the Rambam said if you ate the nut on Erev Yom Tov, you could throw the shell in on Yom Tov. Here the Rambam says no, the opposite. Shaharei huksu. Because now they became muksa. What is this opinion thought? Since they were cracked on Yom Tov and I left a pile on the side, I never intended them for fire. So therefore they become muksa to be used on Yom Tov. So the first opinion is looking at the concept of noilad. Are they born into a new identity on Yom Tov? And therefore, if that happens Erev Yom Tov before the holiday, it's not going to be noilad on the holiday. It's fine. This one is looking at muksa. Muksa means I put it aside, then I'm not going to use it. Why did I put it aside? Because it was already cracked on the day before and I left it aside. So they're saying now look at muksa. If you look at muksa, it's different. But if I ate it on Yom Tov, according to this opinion, then you can go ahead and take the shells and throw them into the fire. Since it was allowed because of the food which is allowed, whenever something is allowed for one part of the purpose, it automatically becomes allowed for all parts of the purpose. Halacha Yud Gimel. The Rambam doesn't say which opinion he holds. He just says most opinions, which is very rare. The Rambam usually is decisive, makes a statement, it keeps going. And in Shulchan Aruch, you have both opinions, and it dealt with of how to go from there. Halacha Yud Gimel. Kaitz Ratov. A wet thorn bush, or wet bush, or wet tree, or branch rather. If it's wet, you're not going to burn it. It's too wet. It's not going to catch on fire. And therefore, I'm not allowed to even use this now as sort of a spit to roast my marshmallow or some other purpose, because since I'm not intending it for its purpose, which is fire, because it's too wet, it becomes muksa. Once it becomes muksa for everything else as well. Noitlin 18 Yudalad 14 Noitlin 18 Masruchum Davne Sukkah Misakin Bahen. If I had wood sitting next to my sukkah, not the wall of the sukkah. The wall of the sukkah, you're not allowed to take it up, be breaking something with the intention of doing something. But this is just sitting right next to it. I'm allowed to take it for a fire and not say, well, maybe it's close to the sukkah. Nope, it's not considered part of the sukkah. I will aim of asada, but you can't just run out and grab branches necessarily from the field. Even if you went out to the field, so to say, and gathered somewhat of a pile of trees for firewood and put it there. But if you went out to the field to cook, you're doing a potluck lunch out in the field outside the back of your house, then you could pick up the branches that are there in the field and use them for the fire. And you're allowed to gather those, bring rather from the gathered trees in a rishus hayachin, which means inside a private domain. And even if it was kind of a place that normally people don't live, but it's still fenced around it, right? That it has to have some kind of door to get through. Can't kind of break the fence. And it was within the boundaries of how much far you're allowed to go on Shabbos. So in other words, the Rambam is basically saying that if you can create a scenario, it's in your domain, you can carry it, it was put aside. It's not outside the tchum, outside the boundary, and it has a doorway to get to you through the fence. Then it's already as if your intention was that since all of this fell into place, I'm going to go use it for fire. But if one of the variables are not met, then I'm not intending to use it. If I'm not intending to use it, it becomes muksa. Halacha tezvav. Ali kind of ali gefanim. Leaves from a vine or leaves from other kind of trees like that. Even if they're gathered in your backyard, so to say, which is surrounded with a fence, etc., like we said in the variables just a second ago. Since the wind will pick them up and blow them, firewood is not going to blow in a normal wind, but leaves are. Therefore, I cannot assume they're going to be there tomorrow when I need them. Therefore, I don't intend to use them. I'm going to have to find something else. So when I walk out the next morning, they're still sitting there. They've already become muksa, set aside out of my mind. On the other hand, if I take a brick and put it on top of a pile of leaves, then it is set proper to use them because I obviously am showing that I want them to be there and therefore I intend to use them. Halacha design. There's a lot of logic behind all of these. Either you show your intention and therefore it's not muksa, or you don't show your intention and therefore it's set aside and therefore it's muksa. Halacha design. 16. An animal which dies on Yom Tov. If it was close to its death already, it was an old, sick animal, or whatever the case may be. From Erev Yom Tov, you could cut it up and throw it to the dogs. But if it wasn't about to die, it was a perfectly healthy animal in your herd, and one day it just drops dead. Since I did not intend or not think it was going to die, therefore my mind was not that I'll be able to feed it to the dogs because I want it as a healthy animal. It's books and you're not allowed to touch it, you're not allowed to feed it to the dogs or do anything. Behemoth kachim, shemesa, an animal of kachim, which, as we said, that was designated for the temple as a carbon, as a sacrifice. Oi truma, or another thing, truma shinit mas, or truma, tithe, which we learned already, what you give to the priest, and it becomes impure. So therefore, the priest can't eat it, and therefore it's lost its ability to be food in a sense. Lo yizizenim and mekaymas, and then it becomes muksa as well, and I cannot use it. 17. Muksa. Animals which are muksa for any number of these reasons. I attend to it. It only receives its blemish differently, becomes impure. Any of the cases we spoke about till now. when we say an animal is muktzah, it's set aside and I can't use it. The Rambam says you can't feed them, you can't water them, give water to them, nothing. Why? Because if I allow you to interact with the animal, you'll treat it like a regular animal, and then you'll take it, and you're not allowed to since it's muktzah already. Incidentally, the Shulchan Aruch does comment that you can put it, just you can't feed it directly. In other words, put down food for the animal. The animal shouldn't die, but don't go ahead and like feed it deliberately. Let it walk a little bit over to its food. And anything which you are not allowed to eat or touch on Yom Tov, because it's muksa, you're not allowed to even carry. So in other words, once I've removed this usage for me, either I can't eat it, or I can't use it to feed my dogs, or whatever the scenario is, and then I'm not allowed to even carry it at all. I have to leave it in its place. That's the classic definition of muktzah. Classic definition of muktzah is once something's set aside, I don't touch it, I don't carry it, I have nothing to do with it anymore. Now again, there's certain, and we learned in Hilchos Shabbat that there's certain variables. Sometimes you're allowed to move it for its space and etc. But that's not the situation we're talking about right now. Yudchas 18, Amachtas Avram Erev Yom Tov. If someone brings in dirt, he gathers a pile of dirt. It's if I put it in one corner of my yard, I put all the dirt that I'm gathering into one corner of the yard. I don't spread it out over the whole yard. Then I'm clearly showing that I want this for a purpose. Therefore, I'm putting it somewhere. Then I'm allowed to do whatever I need to do with it. Of Afer, and also ashes, from a fire that was burnt on Erev Yom Tov. Before Yom Tov, I burnt something, and now I have a pile of ashes. And the muchan, it's set aside. Also, it's not muksa. But anything which was burnt on Yom Tov, in other words, if I made a fire on Yom Tov, as long as the ashes are retaining heat enough to sort of say cook an egg, in other words, a certain level of heat is still there, then I'm allowed to carry it. Mishadai and Eshu, it's still classified as fire, and the fire was classified that I'm allowed to use in Yom Tov, so therefore the ashes retain that permissibility just like the fire. V'im lav, but if it's not hot, it doesn't have any heat enough to cook an egg or anything, then it's become an entirely new object. Once upon a time it was wood or whatever element I was burning, and now it's ashes. Also, I'm not allowed to touch it or carry it. Because it's sort of say born on Yom Tov. Again, it discovered a new identity on Yom Tov. Misha Hayuloi Deker. No, it's Bakarka me Erev Yom Tov. Someone had a shovel stuck into the ground on Erev Yom Tov. V'nitku me Yom Tov, and I pulled it out of the ground on Yom Tov. Ve'ela afar, and it obviously when you pull a shovel out, it kind of takes a scoop of dirt out with it. It's im haya isa afar teirach. If it was soft ground, in other words, it was not packed tightly, but it was soft. So it's kind of a natural progression. I pick up the shovel, something's going to come. I'm allowed to cover something with it. What am I covering? What do I need ground to cover? So when you slaughter an animal, there's a mitzvah, which we'll learn about later, which is to cover the blood with dirt, to kind of remove that temptation for blood and to show that even though we want to eat the animal, we have to kill it, but it's not an excitement of ours. So we kind of cover the blood. What do? We take a handful of dirt and we spray it over, and there's actually a bracha that you say as well. So now the Rambam say, what use would I have for a handful of dirt? That if I'm slaughtering an animal in Yom Tov and I pick up the shovel and out comes a handful of dirt, of loose dirt, I can use this loose dirt to cover the blood and make a bracha. But without, like, a carry it. Aval im hella gush afar, but it was tightly packed, and therefore it's much harder to get it out. Then I can't take this entire scoop of dirt that's packed together and it's going to come out. The Rambam says, why? because it will be like Teichen. Teichen was one of the malachot. We learned one of the prohibited forms of work. We learned in Shabbat when you grind things. Since it's now a solid mass of dirt, in order for me to use it, I'm going to have to break it up into little pieces, and that's similar to the grinding process. So therefore, you're not allowed to do that. So if it's loose, it's loose. You got it already, then pick it up and use it. But if it comes out as a solid piece because it was packed together, then you can no longer use it on Yom Tov. And with that, we finish the chapter.